All right, next is chapter 23. If this is on the screen. Chapter 23 was our diseases of the GI tract. Of course, your normal gut biome protects us as well as provides digestion processes and trains our immune system on what to react to and what not. But your normal gut biome is also very closely linked to other physiological aspects of your body, including your mental health, your propensity for gaining weight or losing weight, and all sorts of other effects in the body. Those microbes and the waste products, signaling molecules, toxins, and all the things that they're associated with making, those things have a wide range of effects on the body throughout the entire body system. So our first thing that we talked about in the diseases was dental caries. It's the most common infectious diseases in people, usually caused by strep mutans and strep sobrinus. These guys form biofilms on your teeth, by using like their capsules or their slime layers and just adhering and then building up on each other, and then other bacteria and protozoa and stuff can also build in on those biofilms that are forming. That's what's going to form plaque. Periodontitis is a gum disease and the tissues surrounding the teeth. And what happens in periodontitis, and then we'll also have the caries associated with like the decay of the teeth itself. But with periodontitis, less common than dental caries, but still a huge, huge problem. Starts off as just gingivitis, which is inflammation of just the gums. But then as the inflammation continues, can lead to the effect of the underlying tissues, including the bone. And you can actually have permanent bone recession as a result of the inflammation present from bacteria and the inflammation that they cause. Right, so if you have Methanobrevibacter oralis as part of your biome, then you are going to be at an increased risk for periodontitis. And Methanobrevibacter oralis is an archaea. It is not a bacteria, it is an archaea. It is a completely different thing than bacteria, even though they look similar under the microscope and have similar effects on the body. Their physiological level, completely different makeup, and just different structure. We didn't talk much about the archaea because they're not usually implicated that much in like human diseases, and they're usually considered more likely to be like our extremophiles, the guys that live in like the extreme environments of the world. But this guy is one that can be part of your microbiome in the oral cavity. Anyways. Trench mouth is whenever you have it's a much quicker and more severe presentation of periodontitis and gingivitis that leads to necrosis of the tissues and biofilm formation that can lead to pseudomembrane formation. It's usually going to be multiple bacteria that are going to be involved in this, and that can include Fusobacterium necrophorum that we talked about in a respiratory tract. So moving on to gastritis and gastric ulcers. These are commonly caused by Helicobacter pylori, which is a very common bacteria found in about half of the population, and it is treatable with antibiotics. Then acute diarrhea. We talked about a lot of diarrhea. Acute bacterial diarrhea. This is when you have loose stools, 3 or more loose stools in a 24-hour period. And the acute version is whenever you have those over a course of less than 14 days, but once you've passed 14 days, then you're getting into the chronic diarrhea. So Shigella, the species of Shigella more commonly associated with causing severe disease will be Shigella dysenteriae, produces an enterotoxin and shigatoxin, which are associated with causing inflammation and damage to the lining of the intestine, leading to dysentery, which is bloody and mucousy diarrhea. Salmonella enterica, and like Salmonella enterica is like the species, and then there's a serotype called typhi, but that these cause diarrhea as well as gastroenteritis, and the typhi serotype is much more severe version. Campylobacter is definitely the most common of the bacterial diarrheas. It's not documented as much just because people don't usually end up needing healthcare for it. Usually we'll get over it in a few days. But it is easily the most common bacterial foodborne illness, and most places don't test for it very regularly, just so you know. It's not required by the FDA to test for it. place in all of this. All right, E. coli, there's a lot of different E. colis that we talked about, but S-Tech or E. coli 0157H7. E. coli S-Tech is Shiga toxin producing E. coli. E. coli is motile and Shigella isn't, and so that's one of their features about them. But this is just E. coli that can produce that Shiga toxin, and so it got those genes through various different versions of genetic transfer that the bacteria use, the horizontal gene transfers, including, just to remind you guys, because you know it's coming up, right? Transformation, picking up the outside DNA, conjugation, swapping the DNA through like the channels that are formed that we call the sex pili, or through transduction, which is whenever viruses transmit the DNA. And then that would be what we would call lysogenic conversion, which is the more likely case for Shiga toxin is probably a result of a lysogenic conversion event. Anyways, moving on to C. diff. Clostridioides difficile, used to be Clostridium difficile. C. diff causes a pseudomembranous colitis. It is a gram-positive bacteria. It is endospore forming, and those endospores are really hardy and hard to get rid of. And so this spreads like wildfire in hospitals where people are already taking antibiotics to cure or prevent infection. And so it clears out their biome, and then C. diff is happy to take up those stadium seats and overgrow and cause its effects. Diarrhea is best treated with fluids and electrolyte replacement. That's the best treatment no matter what kind of diarrhea that you have. We can treat with antibiotics if the body isn't managing the infection effectively, but typically we're just going to let it run its course and treat with fluid and electrolyte replacement. Cholera is a disease caused by the bacterium Vibrio cholerae that causes rice water stools. We have massive exodus of fluids and electrolytes out of the cells in the body and then being dumped out through the intestinal tract. And this can become deadly with how dehydrating it is and can lead to coma and death from the loss of the fluids and the electrolytes. Cryptosporidium is a protozoal disease. The cysts are resistant to chlorine, so this is a common one in swimming pools. Norovirus is the cruise ship virus and most commonly associated with diarrhea outbreaks on cruise ships, but you can get norovirus outside of cruise ships. So it's not only found there. I want to be very clear about that. It's found in society, and then society brought it into the cruise ships. Rotavirus is more common than norovirus, but it just doesn't cause a very severe presentation of diarrheal disease. It can be more severe in younger kids, so there are vaccines available for it. Food poisoning is a term referred to diarrhea and nausea and other GI symptoms that are caused by the toxins produced by bacteria that are on the food. You don't necessarily get infection from the bacteria that cause food poisoning. Y'all, my husband last night, because I was taking down the test, I had my late night class last night, which I don't think if there's anybody even on here that's from my night class. I don't think so. No. So yeah, it's just Brandy and Heather. Of course it is. Anyways, no offense to you guys watching the recording later on, but anyways, so last night I had like this really severe pain in my abdomen. I've had it before. I knew exactly what it was. It was pancreatitis. And I have it like probably once or twice a year, sometimes more often, just depending on what my body wants to do in life. And so I don't know. I just ate some pasta salad before I went home. After the Sem Lab, I ate pasta salad and then I came back to work. And shortly after getting to work and getting ready to start my class, I started having this massive pain in my abdomen, and it was rough. I will say like an 8 on the pain scale. And I was like sweating and all this. And I was like, man, this isn't good. And so I had to go get some antacid, came back down, started doing the Kahoot. And I was like, I'm not going to make it. It started coming back again. And so I just brought the antacid bottle back down from my office. And I mean, it was bad. I thought I wasn't going to be able to do lecture. It was causing me like double over in pain and everything like that. But I don't know what's going on with that. I went to the ER for it one time. And those doctors at the ER were like, well, you need to stop drinking alcohol. You stop drinking. And I was like, my guy, I don't drink alcohol. I might have a drink like at a social event, maybe twice a year, like a couple of drinks. I'm past that phase in my life. And I don't really get that much enjoyment from it. Have a margarita, maybe, a couple times a year or something. Like, I don't drink. And he's like, well, sure, you need to stop drinking. And I'm like, okay, whatever. So I go to my doctor and, know my doctor for like a decade or something. And I'm just like, yeah, so I guess it's been longer than a decade. I hate how old I've gotten. It's been a long time. It's been 15 years I've been seeing this freaking doctor. So anyways, go to this doctor. And I tell her that, and we do a blood test, and the blood test this time comes back normal. And so we haven't been able to like track down like what's causing it, but whatever. It was cripplingly painful. So I called my husband on my way home after the lab exam. The acid helped, and I was able to recover, and we went on with the rest of our day. But after the last lab final, I was tearing down the test, and I called my husband on the way home. And it's like 10 o'clock at night. And I tell him, I'm like, yeah, my stomach was really hurting. He's like, yeah, my stomach is hurting too. He's like, I got home from work and I mean, I've just had diarrhea. I've been nauseous and all this stuff. And it was like right after just a little while, a couple hours after we went to, Olive Garden. And I was like, well, what did you get? And he was like, I got the soup and the salad. And I was like, oh, you have food poisoning. And he was like, no, it's probably E. coli or whatever. I'm like, no, it's food poisoning. He's fine. He's back at work today. So yeah, it's food poisoning. And so what's going on there is with him, I don't know what's going on with my pancreatitis, but what's going on with him is he had eaten probably salad or something that people had touched with their hands, and then staph will grow on that. And it's not enough to cause an infection in your belly. Those guys won't survive. The bacteria won't necessarily make it into your GI tract, but the toxins will. And the toxins will make it in there and then cause the signs and symptoms of diarrhea. And then once your body clears out the toxin, you get over it. So almost every time that you are having a brief bout of GI illness after you're eating something like that, if it lasts less than 24 hours, it's almost always going to be staph that causes it. Other bacteria can do this, and both of the other two examples that I give are endospore-forming bacteria. These are Bacillus cereus and Clostridium perfringens, that they might live in or on the food that you consume and then produce the toxins, and then you ingest the food, and the toxins are what are making you sick because they made it through that GI tract and were able to lead to that diarrhea and everything like that. So these are self-limiting when you have food poisoning. It's just a matter of the body clearing it out. And there's no like, medication or anything for that. It's just letting it run its course. All righty. EAEC is a cause of the chronic versions of diarrhea. So this is enteroaggregative E. coli. And then we have some protozoal causes of chronic diarrhea, which was Giardia, Cyclospora, and Entamoeba. Those are all going to be protozoal ones. Cyclospora is going to be your typical gastroenteritis that is going to be chronic presentation. It's fecal oral transmission. Whereas giardiasis is going to be usually transmitted from like wildlife and water contamination from wildlife's water contamination. It is fecal oral as well, but like more commonly associated with water contamination from that. And that's when it leads to the greasy malodorous stools, a very long-term flatulent sort of presentation of chronic diarrhea. And then Entamoeba histolytica causes a dysentery version. Moving on to hepatitis. Hepatitis is inflammation of the liver, and this may or may not cause jaundice as a result of that. Let's see, hepatitis A is a fecal oral transmission virus, and there are vaccines for it. Most people will recover just fine from hepatitis A on their own, and it has more common to have like a subclinical or even asymptomatic presentation with this infection. It's a pretty common one and isn't super severe, but can lead to severe effects, and so that's why we have the vaccine for it. Hepatitis B is a DNA virus that has reverse transcriptase. Again, whenever its DNA is going through transcription and translation to make the protein products of the DNA, DNA gets made transcribed into RNA, and then that virus uses a reverse transcriptase to turn the RNA into the DNA, and then inserts that DNA into your genome, and this can lead to cancer as a result in the liver. And so this is transmitted by a small amount of blood. So this is blood and sexual contact that will transmit this one. There is a vaccine for hepatitis B, but there isn't really effective treatment, but people can recover from hepatitis B more easily, naturally, over time, given time to deal with that. Whereas hepatitis C is going to be a more chronic presentation for the most part. Most people aren't going to recover naturally from it, but there are drug treatments for hepatitis C. And hepatitis C can also lead to cancer as well. The longer, more chronic that disease becomes, more likely the cancer is going to be. There's no vaccine for hep C, but there are drug treatments for hep C. All right, and the hep C is transmitted by a true blood transmission. So it does require intravenous blood transfer, typically. So that's going to be through transfusion or through intravenous drug use, like needles and things like that. Are the Helminth diseases. Most of these Helminth infections are what we call neglected tropical diseases, things that aren't getting funding because it doesn't interest the more developed worlds to put money into those things. And so they're pretty under-researched, and it's going to affect mostly underserved populations, the poorer populations of the world. We see this more in what we call third world or underdeveloped countries for the most part. So we had, oh, and this reminds me with pinworms. Pinworms. So right, we're going to talk about these guys. Starting off with pinworms, this is caused by the worm Enterobius vermicularis. And I had spoken in my lecture previously saying that we treat the pinworms with ivermectin, but that was incorrect. We treat typically with pyrantel. I don't know why. It's like I said it one time and it came out of my mouth, and then my mind like clung onto it, which I know is a problem for some of the people that are studying, that they'll see something or write something or whatever, and that thing sticks, but it doesn't always serve them in the future. So that happened to me. But yes, Enterobius vermicularis, the pinworms, we usually treat with pyrantel, which is a anti-helminthic drug. Pyrantel, ivermectin, and praziquantel are our most commonly used anti-helminthics. But yes, whipworms, this is caused by the worm Trichuris trichuria. Large amounts of eggs and larvae produced from this, and this can lead to loss of the tone of the muscle tissue in the intestinal tract. Ascaris lumbricoides is the giant intestinal roundworm. It is the most common of all the helminth infections in the world. We don't have it in the United States, which should put that in perspective, considering we talk about pinworms not being uncommon here. Tapeworms, again, tapeworms are a type of flatworm, and flatworms, for all of our helminths, the flatworms overall are called platyhelminthes, and the tapeworms are called cestodes, and the flukes are called trematodes. So you know this stuff is coming up again, so just reminding you guys. So our tapeworms are cestodes. This would be Diphyllobothrium lodum, which is associated more with like sushi and raw fish, and Hymenolepsis, which are rat tapeworms and are associated with mostly with animal populations, so people can get them as well. And then Taeniosolium, which is our more famous tapeworm, the long one that consists of the different segments that we call proglottids, and those proglottids can break off and they contain eggs, and then that's how this would be transmitted through the fecal oral routes. But these guys also can form these like encapsulated structures. They were what we call encysting, E-N-C-Y-S-T. Encysting is one of these worms, and a lot of them can do this, can form these capsules inside of like muscle tissue or other organ tissue in the bodies. And then when you eat that, that's what typically leads to the transmission of these guys, and they will form an actual worm in the gut. But if you eat the proglottids, people normally present with something called cysticercosis, which is where we'll get those cysts in our muscle tissues or in our organ tissues, and especially in the brain, which is called neurocysticercosis. Next, the Chinese liver flukes. This is Opisthochus sinensis and Clonorchus sinensis. And these guys will basically like aggregate in the bile duct and block the bile duct and have similar signs and symptoms to gallstones, but can also have like the inflammatory liver presentation just associated with the infection. Trichinosis is caused by the Trichinella protozoa, or not protozoa, I'm so sorry, the helminths, the worms. And again, do a similar thing where they will encyst in the muscle tissue. They'll migrate, get them from fecal oral transmission, but you mostly will get them from eating undercooked meat. And so when you get it from undercooked meat, then you're going to have your GI presentation. And then that'll be the initial stage where you'll have feeling sick and have GI presentation. But then the worms are able to migrate into your tissues in your body and then form their little capsules in the muscle and organ tissues of the human body. leading to diffuse presentation of inflammation, puffy eyes, and systemic inflammation as a result of these guys being pretty much throughout the tissue of the body. Intense muscle pain and joint pain as well associated with that. Undercooked pork is the most common cause of spreading that. And then schistosomes. These are flukes. They're what we call the blood flukes. This is Schistosoma japonicum and Schistosoma masoni. They get in through intact skin in water. And so the schistosomes have a life cycle where they have a stage of their cycle in snails. And so the version of the schistosomes that comes out of the snails are the ones that move into the fresh water and can migrate in through the skin. And when they do that, it causes an itchy rash that we call swimmer's rash associated with that. They can also migrate throughout the body through the bloodstreams and cause disease in the liver, which is where we have the most severe presentation of the disease as it progresses, but it can also cause issues with the spleen since they live in the bloodstream. So splenomegaly, hepatomegaly, liver disease, and these guys can also migrate into the bladder and like cause issues with the bladder being able to empty as well. So that's pretty good. All right, moving on to chapter 23. These are our GI diseases. And most commonly missed topics for the GI diseases, cryptosporidiosis. When I took immunology in undergrad, I had an immunology professor. He taught immunology. He didn't teach microbiology. And I remember in class him asking me what type of an organism, if anybody remembered what cryptosporidium was. And I had said at the time incorrectly, I was like, I'm pretty sure it's a fungus. Now I remember, because later on, I remember looking back in my notes for microbiology later on that day and like realizing that it was a protozoa. And I have not forgotten it since then because that was that moment where I was like, oh, I told the professor the wrong thing. Yeah, cool. Well, as I'm sure you guys have learned in my class, if not in other classes, professors are just humans too, and they sometimes make mistakes too. And we have our own issues with recall and things like this. So cryptosporidiosis. Cryptosporidium is a protozoa that has a cyst in a trophozoite form, and the cyst is the one that is resistant to chlorine. And so those cysts, we call them oocysts, but you don't need to worry about that. I'm just going to call them cysts on the test. They can survive the acid of the stomach and everything like that. And so these are going to get into the body and cause profuse watery diarrhea. It's fecal oral. It's usually transmitted through contaminated water. It can survive chlorination pretty well for that. Crypto can cling to chlorine and cause chaos in the colon. So cryptosporidium is a protozoa. Cryptosporidium is a protozoa. It causes diarrhea. You can't spell diarrhea. And then, let's see what else about it. The cyst is resistant. Chlorine. All right, so there's your little notes up here. Let's get to our questions. Which of the following is the primary mode of transmission for cryptosporidium? The cyst resists chlorine. This is important to remember about it. We know chlorine, chlorinated water is where this is going to be the issue. So is it airborne? No. Is it with contaminated water or food? Yes, probably this one. Is it insect bites? No. Is it contact with soil? No. It's going to be mostly water or food. Why is cryptosporidium difficult to eliminate from the water supply? Well, I'm going to assume it's going to be one of this. So let's look at our choices. Does it form spores that are highly contagious? Well, it doesn't form spores. So don't get confused here because protozoa don't form spores. They form cysts. And so this isn't going to be our answer because that's not correct for these. Does it produce toxins that persist in the water? It's not the toxins. It's going to be literally these cysts. They are resistant to chlorine. Does it survive extreme heat and boiling? It's not going to survive that, but whatever with this pen. So it's going to be the cysts. Next is Hep A, specifically Hep A, and people were having some issues with in previous exams. So hepatitis A, this is a virus. It's going to potentially cause liver disease that may cause jaundice. It is transmitted by the fecal oral route. Most people have subclinical or minor signs or symptoms It's not usually a severe disease, though in some cases it can become severe. And most people will recover fully without permanent issues. No sequelae usually associated with this one. And there is a vaccine for this. All right. Hep A. Okay, I like this one. This was one that I liked. Hep A is from a plate. You get it from food and water. You get it from ingestion. Okay. And you can avoid it with a vaccine. Hep B and C are blood and contact, right? And they can't be curbed. C can't be curbed by a jab with a vaccine. So C can't be curbed. All right, moving on. I kind of like that one. That wasn't the worst one that I have on there. All right, what is the primary mode of transmission for Hep A? Hep A is from a plate. This is going to be fecal oral routes from food and water. Okay, so we'll look for that. Is it from blood and body fluids? No. Is it airborne? No. Is it fecal oral through contaminated food or water? Yes. Is it insect bites? No. Which of the following is true about Hep A? So does it cause a chronic liver disease? No, most people recover without any problems on their own. Can it be prevented with a vaccine? Yes, it can. Are there any other choices that might be better? Is it primarily transmitted through blood and sexual contact? No, that's going to be Hep B. And Hep C is transmitted really only through blood contact. Is it commonly treated with antiviral medications? You usually don't need antivirals. So this is a thing that could trip some people up on a test, right? You would see, oh, it's a virus, you treat it with antivirals, but now you don't need it for this one. Most people recover on their own without any treatment. And so this is going to be B. It can be prevented with a vaccine. Alrighty, schistosomiasis. These guys are flukes. So remember with our helmets, these are our worms, and that these are animals. They're all multicellular creatures. So helmets, they're animals and they're multicellular. So we have basically the round worms and the flat worms. Just remind you guys that we're talking about the worms here, the parasitic worms. So you have the round worms and the flat worms. Round worms are called nematodes. Oh, come on, Pen. And the flat worms are called platyhelminthes. Right, platy. This is an A. And there's two different kinds of platyhelminthes flatworms. These are going to be the tapeworms and the flukes. The tapeworms are called cestodes, and the flukes are called trematodes. All right. And then we have some overview of the disease and the immune response and things like that. Again, schistosomes have a life cycle in snails, and so this is transmitted in freshwater bodies of water. And what happens is that the feces and urine of people that are infected aren't treated and they're returned back to the water where people are bathing and getting their drinking water from and everything like that. So these are easily prevented with proper like sewage treatment and water treatment and things like that. But then what happens is you poop or pee out the schistosomes. They have a life cycle step inside the snail. The snail releases the schistosomes that can then get inside the body through the intact skin. These are blood flukes. They live in the bloodstream. The liver and the spleen are going to be the most heavily affected organs from this, but you can also have certain species of schistosomes that will also aggregate in the bladder and cause issues with the bladder. The rash is common from what the entry site, how these guys get in. They're able to cover themselves with antigens from the host, like they take proteins and molecules from the host bloodstream and just like coat themselves with it. So schistosomes swim, stick, and settle as skin-penetrating snail scent flukes. I think this pretty much does kind of cover everything about that, but let's move on and see if we can answer some questions about these guys. So schistosomes are blood flukes. If they are flukes, these are flatworms, platyhelminthes. And then the flukes are known as, oh, come on. The flukes are known as trematodes. What else do I want to say? They get in through intact skin in the fresh water. And they can cover themselves with the antigens. Cover with host antigen to hide from the immune system. Okay, so I've got some notes down about these guys. Let's see if we can answer some questions. How does schistosoma infect the humans? So this is this one, intact skin in fresh water. So it's usually contaminated water, and then a life cycle step in the snail, they release the guys that get into the skin. So do we ingest it through contaminated food or water? We don't ingest it. Does it penetrate the skin during contact with contaminated fresh water? It's probably this one. Airborne, no. Direct contact, no. So it's going to be B. And what type of organisms are schistosomes? They are flukes. Like we said, flukes are a type of flatworm. Flat platyhelminthes, like the tapeworms, are also platyhelminthes, but then platyhelminthes is divided into the tapeworms and the flukes. And the tapeworms are the cestodes, and the flukes are the trematodes. So just to summarize that stuff. All right, so that is it for our review for week 15 and our respiratory and gastrointestinal disease chapters. Do you ladies have any questions for me before we go? Awesome. Okay. Thank you guys. And I will see you next week. And remember, you can always email me during your study processes. And happy studying. We've only got one more week of class left, and then the final is here somehow. So have a good weekend, and I will see you guys later.